The mark of the beast. From credit cards to barcodes, microchips to vaccines, the mark of the beast has been linked to more modern innovations than there are Fast and Furious movies.
You embarrass me!
In this video, we're going to discuss what the mark of the beast in the Book of Revelation really is. The Book of Revelation, with its apocalyptic imagery of beasts, dragons, angels, and cosmic battles, has attracted a lot of different perspectives on the idea of the end of the world and the decline of civilization. Interpreting details in the Book of Revelation have led some people to think that these end times are coming soon or even happening right now. In every generation, there have been people who linked the Book of Revelation to events like world wars and dictators rising. Perhaps the most famous example of this type of thinking is Harold Camping, who spent $100 million advertising the end of the world as May 2011. When May 2011 passed without destruction, he realized he miscalculated and used numbers in the Book of Revelation to arrive at a new, correct apocalypse date in October 2011. And as I'm sure you're aware, that didn't happen. But was the Book of Revelation written to predict the future? How was the book read in its ancient context? The Book of Revelation, as strange as it is with beasts, dragons, and number codes, is not unique in the Bible. It uses a style of writing that can also be found in the Old Testament books of Daniel and Ezekiel and even parts of Isaiah. It is most often referred to as apocalyptic writing. Daniel and Ezekiel had a certain political and historical context that they were writing about life in exile under foreign rule. In the same way, Revelation has a historical context that it was speaking into. Revelation is traditionally understood to be addressed to persecuted Christians under the Roman Emperor Domitian in the late 1st century. The historical details of how widespread Roman persecution of Christians really was is hotly debated, but there are several references in the book to Christians being imprisoned and suffering at the hands of powerful enemies. The Book of Revelation sets itself up to the reader as giving them a bird's eye view of what's going on around them. In the book, after a series of short letters, the author John writes about a series of visions. These visions are a bit like being taken into an airport control tower. In an airport, things look chaotic on the ground. Okay, well, I mean, at the time of making this video, airports are pretty dead. But trust me, this was a good analogy like 2 years ago. An airport normally looks like chaos on the ground. Planes, vehicles, and baggage are going every which way. What does it all mean? But if you were invited into the airport control tower, you would see the crucial decisions being made in order to keep all the pieces carefully choreographed to execute the plans of the controllers. Suddenly, the goings-on down below make sense. In a similar way, for John's readers, the visions in Revelation are like going up into the airport control tower. They are a reassurance to the reader that even though they face uncertainty, God is in control. So in that sense, the Book of Revelation is about the difficulties that Christians faced in John's day and the hope of a better future, not necessarily direct predictions for the future. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have meaning for future readers. We'll talk more about that. But for now, the aim of Revelation was unlikely to have been predicting specific events in the future. So let's get into the details. Before we look at the mark of the beast, who is the beast? Most scholars agree that the beast likely represents the Roman Empire and its rulers, perhaps even specifically Nero or Domitian. It's fairly widely known that the number of the beast is 666. Chapter 13 verse 8 invites the reader to interpret that number. Ancient readers would have been familiar with using a form of literary interpretation known as gematria, where one adds up the numerical values of each letter. Caesar Neron, also known as Nero, adds up to 666. You know what else adds up to 666? Korean pop. Now, while 666 is the number everyone is familiar with, the oldest fragment of Revelation actually reads 616, and conveniently, the alternative spelling for Caesar Nero adds up to 616. Now, Nero had likely died before Revelation was penned, but there was a belief by some at the time that he had not died and would return to rule Rome. As such, Nero came to represent the fear of persecution, even if Christians didn't believe he would literally return. By the end of the 1st century, a cult of the Roman emperor had begun to develop, and the Roman emperor started to be viewed as divine. Now, this posed a problem for early Christians who worshipped Christ alone. Other scholars argue that 666 refers to the yearly wealth of Solomon, arguing that it symbolizes the misuse of wealth and power, though this doesn't account for the alternative number 616. Regardless, it's evident that the beast refers to unjust powers and authorities, and for John's audience, that was most likely the Roman Empire, or at least parts of it. And so, what about the mark of the beast? Given the highly symbolic nature of Revelation, we can't know for sure, but the most widely accepted interpretation by scholars is that the mark or engraving of the beast, as it is in Greek, likely referred to Roman coinage and the economic system. The emperor's face was literally engraved on coinage, and Christians would have faced increased difficulty participating in this economic system when the emperor was to be worshipped. Another plausible interpretation is that it represented the kind of branding or mark that an ancient slave might receive on his body or forehead. In this way, it represented the fear of enslavement to the Roman Empire. But whatever it was, it would have been something understandable to John's early Christian audience. Ultimately, Revelation reassured its readers that despite the beast and dragon, God is in control. The end of the book of Revelation describes God thwarting these enemies, and it highlights Jesus' victory over them. The author of Revelation was not aware of microchips, vaccines, credit cards, and barcodes. John had no knowledge of modern wars, dictators, or popes, but Revelation's themes of facing hardship under oppressive powers and the hope that it's all going to be okay because of Jesus, those ideas are timeless and speak to generation after generation of believers, which in part explains the desire throughout history to reinterpret Revelation for each new context that history faces, even if the specific details end up being over-interpreted. John, with his ancient worldview, likely did believe there would be an end of the world, the apocalypse. But his writing in Revelation is primarily about the concerns of the world that he was living in, framed using the biblical language of apocalypse. His concern was for reassurance and hope, to spur Jesus' followers to be strong and faithful, knowing that Jesus had victory over their adversaries. Now, I still remember many years ago, a pastor of a small country town church told me, if you want to get people riled up, talk about the book of Revelation. Interpreting this book divides Christians and skeptics alike, but approaching it in its historical context is consistent with how other books of the Bible are interpreted, looking at what the text meant in its original context before trying to learn lessons in new contexts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you learned something new, and maybe you disagree entirely. But if you found this video helpful, leave a like, comment, and share it with someone you know. I'm Lachlan, and I'll see you in the next episode of Bible Unboxed.
You heard about what's going on in there? Heard a lot of bullshit talk, I know that much. This isn't bullshit, my friend.
Do you know something?
No, listen.
What do you know?
Maybe I do and maybe I don't. What I say is they got no business negotiating. We're gonna be going back in there with a bullet for everybody in the yard. Oh, is that right? We do it now, we do it later. Later ain't gonna be no use. Am I right, Hal?
Now, wait a minute, Frank. Got a lot of angry guys in there, black Muslims, pastors, young lords, besides your average anti-social.
We gotta go in, right? Clean their clocks.
I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. Mean if you really believe that you're inferior. You really believe that black is supposed to stay
For
back.
400 years you had your knees on our necks, a garden of evil with no seeds of respect.
In America's mirror, all she sees is regret. Instead of letting blood live, they begging for bloodlet. Revenge is a dish that's served on platelets. Transfusion of confusion, abusing our intellect. I can't be bought with a $1,200 check, even though $1,200 can make a meal stretch. My mama wasn't rich, but she earned my respect. She made a little bit of money for a lot of blood, tears, and sweat. Jumping up and down on police cars, I'm vexed. After Chauvin killed George Floyd, we got next. Molotov cocktails, anarchy on the set. The rich took the loot, so now we loot shit. Feeling like a caged tiger that's whipped to do tricks. That's why I started fires and yelled and threw bricks. They tried to run me over and arrest me and shit. Tase pepper spray and engage with the kid. They ran up in the state house with them AKs quick. But let a nigga try and do that white boy shit. Won't be no rubber bullets ricocheting off ribs. But the white supremacists go in the cops' face and spit. Try to barbecue? Becky call the cops on the kid. Hoping and praying it'd be some Emmett Till shit. Sandra wasn't bland, they hated Mike cause he brown. Trayvon should've had an Aston Martin riding around. Amadou Diallo, it's way too many to follow. Vato, how much of my pride I gotta swallow? God only knows how deep this plan goes. I was dealing with this shit as a teen in Kangos. Harassed by cops, word to my ancestors' souls. And watching that man die slow left a hole. He cried for his mama as the murder unfolds. If it wasn't for the phone, Chauvin would be at home. Feeling justified cause of George's skin tone. I'm telling it to those with melanin, you're not alone. The new Malcolm, Martin, and Marcuses are now grown. America's a graveyard full of black men's bones. And I ain't got to tell you that Breonna Taylor got slayed in her own home. Had they lived, Sean could've rocked bells. Eric could've garnered attention. Beyond the t-shirts and obituary mentions. Oscar could've been counting grants. Tamir could've went to Rice. They owed them cops nothing, but all of them paid the price. So yeah, you right. We should protect our Second Amendment rights. Cause in a second, a dirty cop could kick the door in at night. A tooth for a tooth and a life for a life. We refuse to live in hell while you living in paradise. Being black in America's like rolling a pair of dice. But the stakes are way higher, you gambling with my life. Black Lives Matter. Forever.